Welcome, everyone. Great that you're all here. We're going to do a presentation. Well, Brian is going to do a presentation. Brian Kaney from Boston for Monster, and also the head of the FHIR DevDays run officially. Yeah, Brian, please.
There we go. And I actually work on a few IGs here and there, including the one over there, which is interesting, the SQL on FHIR one.
Can I take a picture before you go to the next?
Oh, with my... Well, thank you. Now it's on record. Oh, wait, is this being recorded?
It is recorded.
I didn't sign the waiver.
You did. We already had.
Okay, great.
You're good to go.
So here I kind of set this up as like a problem statement solution, and then we kind of go through the implementation guide. I think as we see a lot of adoption of FHIR for exchanging fax and patient data, we're now starting to see a lot more demand for so-called knowledge artifacts or knowledge content. And these can take the form of quality measures, practice guidelines, order catalogs, questionnaires, health surveys, things like this. This growth is leading to some growing pains. We feel it's important to manage and distribute this content in a predictable and deterministic way. And right now, current / up until just recently, solutions have been fairly fragmented. We have FHIR packages, we have some FHIR APIs we can use, but there wasn't really a lot of consensus around how we distribute these things, which actually leads to less interoperability. And so the solution is to reach broad alignment on how do we define what a knowledge artifact is in FHIR. What are the operations and APIs to support the lifecycle management of this content, like packaging them up, publishing them, distributing them, and then some conventions around knowledge operations. A lot of these pieces, these FHIR resources that we're creating, we do interesting things with them. We pre-populate them if they're a questionnaire, or we apply them if it's a plan definition we want to do decision support, or we run a measure. And that's kind of what the CRMI, canonical resource infrastructure management, well, no, I guess, Brayden, you probably came up with that.
No, several committees did.
Several committees did. Okay. Well, we have, I call it CRMI, and I think of CRM because... Okay, there's that image too. So let's first talk like what is a FHIR artifact. By the way, these are AI generated background images, so I didn't want to feel left out. I'll give you my secret prompts later. So a knowledge artifact is really a resource that's context independent. So instead of like an actual patient's blood pressure, it might be the concept of blood pressure. And also value sets, so the terminology resource types are also considered knowledge artifacts. An interesting footnote here is that we do find that there are some things that we call knowledge artifacts that are not canonical resources. Many are, meaning in FHIR they have like certain properties, but some actually aren't. There's medication, substance, and medication knowledge that we want to treat as knowledge artifacts that aren't in the FHIR specification as such. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few slides. So on the implementation guide website, there's this nice this nice table that kind of categorizes the different types of knowledge artifacts. So if your favorite thing is a measure, you can see it here as well as terminology. And I guess the footnote here is when we want to refer to something like a a type of care team in this example, we are referred to a structure definition or a profile of that care team, and that's how we kind of have it as a knowledge artifact, because it's the instance of that care team really isn't considered a knowledge artifact. There's knowledge representation levels. I guess I'll point out some of this has been like a combination of pieces of these definitions and even profiles that were spread into a bunch of different implementation guides, one about quality measures, one about practice guidelines, and so on. And so part of CRMI is to start kind of putting all those together and really focus on this artifact lifecycle and distribution. And so there's a couple profiles that talk about what it means to be shareable, publishable, computable, executable. I won't get into the details because I don't think we have time, but you can check out those profiles there, but they all have certain validation and requirements to be considered at these. And it's important that we think about these because this ties directly into like how we do the content management life cycle, like at different phases of the of that cycle. We have like parts where we check off that certain things are established for validation purposes. So I mentioned that there are some non-canonical artifacts that are considered knowledge artifacts, and there are canonical ones. So canonical is right in the core spec for how you identify them. It's the URL and potentially the version, optionally the version. And the way you reference is you can have it be this little mini URL DSL that has a pipe in it, and the first part of the pipe is the kind of URL portion, pipe followed by the version. So in the case of a non-canonical FHIR artifact, we have some extensions that are in like the HL7 extension pack that we use. So URL and version, the analogies are the extension artifact URL, artifact version, and then the reference we use the extension artifact URI reference, and it uses that same similar DSL where you can have that pipe character in it. So now I'm going to talk about the lifecycle management, and so there's like I tried to kind of reframe this diagram that's in the implementation guide to annotate it here with what we mean by those computable, publishable, executable, and shareable concepts. And so as these artifacts are being created, there's a process that goes through these L1, L2, L3. I guess I should have had a slide in there. Those are like knowledge representation levels. This is typically during authoring time this happens. So if you have a team that's creating your quality measures or your guidelines or what have you, many times you might have a phase where they're broken down into from like a plain text PubMed article or something like a PDF file, and it starts getting broken down into different levels of resolution, and then eventually it can be published and then executed by a target downstream system. And so there are some semantics in the IG currently. I don't know if this is exhaustive, but there are typical processes that happen during authoring time. There's cloning, drafting, comparing two resources, reviewing, approving, and releasing them. And the IG has like some operations that can define this in FHIR, as well as the semantics, so that if you aren't going to use FHIR for your content creation process, you can still kind of take advantage of some of these semantics. And that was probably confusing. So this is also a generated image, but so there is some tension. When FHIR packages came out, they're kind of like software packages. They have an identifier. You install them very similar to how you might install a Maven package or an NPM package. But FHIR initially wasn't created that way. It was based on REST, and these were resources that live on a server somewhere. And so I think once we have, there's certain times where it makes sense to have things in package form, and there's certain times where you want to use the FHIR REST API to like download the resources. And I think what we tried to do is strike a balance in this implementation guide to kind of allow for both. So like some of the characteristics of a FHIR package is you can use existing publishing tooling like the IG Publisher. A lot of you might know Sushi for FHIR shorthand. There's CQF tooling, and you can write scripts. Many times you also have this content in the Git repository, and you can manage it just like you would manage software in your software delivery lifecycle, including automated validation and testing. And at the end of the day, you can publish it out as a FHIR package. REST resources, you can consider a FHIR server that you're kind of using to have a lower level environment, an authoring server, and you can have these similar operations occur using a web service effectively, and you're at the end kind of publishing them as FHIR resources. And so as we tried to support both in the IG, and the IG is, I don't know if it's officially balloted yet. It's close to balloted, maybe.
CRMI?
Yeah.
Oh, it's public.
Oh, it is published. Great. But we can do another version if there's anything here that we want to update. And so the way that some groups that I work with, we do this is we do support both. And so you can publish content as a FHIR package, which is kind of loosely based on the NPM specification. And then behind the scenes, we kind of open up that package and put all those resources on a FHIR server so that consumers, downstream consumers that want to use the FHIR API to access their resources can. And for especially a lot of the authoring tooling prefers using the FHIR packages, they can. And so we kind of try to make both available. And so, yeah, I mean, our balance that we found was FHIR packages for author time, and then FHIR REST was like more for like downstream use cases. We were in Texas a few weeks ago, so I have a theme going on. I mean, there's still some challenges here. For instance, there is no actual representation in FHIR of a FHIR package. There is the implementation guide resource that's kind of close. It has a lot of the properties that you would find in like a package.json inside an NPM or a FHIR package. But and it's also tricky to build a FHIR package from FHIR resources if they weren't published that way. So if you just have these resources that you're using REST operations to create, and you've never existed in a FHIR package, it can be tricky to figure out like how would you make that a package so you could support use cases where that was like authoring use cases. I don't think FHIR-I is ever going to remove like the create verb for a value set or a plan definition. So generally, we're always going to have a mix here. I don't think a lot of people I talk to is like, oh, we'll just put everything in a package all the time. Well, FHIR does allow us to do a post operation to create these resources. So I think we just have to be able to support both, especially in this implementation guide. And then there's also, so the last kind of challenge is that many times you can create canonical references without that version. The version's actually optional. And so how do you handle that downstream when you're referencing LOINC, but you don't reference LOINC 2.74? It's hard to have deterministic kind of operations if the references aren't versioned. So kind of some of the guidelines, recommendations on packaging talk about those different profiles. We recommend specifying a versioning algorithm, and that helps if you do have that case where you have to figure out what the most recent like measure resource is. The versioning algorithm can help. Maybe it's semver, or maybe it's an incrementing number. We also have this idea of considering a meta tag for creating like a SHA hash. So that consumers that download the resources can kind of verify the integrity. And then as we package up, it can be as a FHIR package or maybe as a FHIR bundle using conditional create. semantics. I kind of talked about this already. So publishing could, you could publish both using a FHIR API or using the FHIR package API. And now for distribution, in the implementation guide, we try to cover different use cases. So there's the package use case and the FHIR REST use case. We also have this package operation, which I know might be confusing because the word package is appearing many times. And then there's this idea of being able to have content federation, where you might have upstream partners that are creating content for your institution, and how do you share across that boundary, and how would your customers of your content keep up to date, like as new things change. And so there's several kind of modes of distribution covered in the IG as well. So the package operation is basically, you can imagine if you have published 2 implementation guides, one has guidelines and one is quality measures, but the plan definition is reusing the same logic that the measure is in this contrived example. If I'm needing to get everything I need to run plan definition 1, at that point I don't really care which IG it's in as an execution environment if I'm like running the measure or running the guideline in this case. But what I do need is I need all the downstream dependencies. And this was like really tricky. Like each resource type, each of the knowledge artifact resource types have different like dependency tracing going on. There's different ways that things link to each other. So you kind of have to go through a resource type by resource type basis to figure out how the downstream dependencies are linked. And that's kind of what the package operation is about. The package operation returns a bundle that has all the dependencies packaged up, and then that's what you can give your kind of execution environment. We also have this data requirements operation that exists in the core specification, and that kind of works the same way, but in that case, a client may have already downloaded all of this stuff, and so the data requirements operation can inform the client of what is supposed to be there, and then the client can figure out if they need to download more resources or in their local cache if they have them, they might not need to. So federated content, and I'm doing a little birds of a feather talk tomorrow, and it's actually kind of funny, but I'll talk about that tomorrow. But in this case, you might have different upstream, it could be the official HL7 FHIR packages, or you might have a trading partner or some national quality measure organization where you would want to be able to have your ability to uplink. And we kind of took the idea from, so uplinks are there's a coming extension that I think Graham has already added to allow us to set a package scope. So if you know NPM packages at all, sometimes you see they begin with an @ sign, and many times if you're using Artifactory or some sort of local artifact registry, these scopes can be used for rules, so you can figure out which upstream customers to go to. And so if you're an organization creating guidelines, you might have a scope for all of your guidelines, and that would allow your downstream customers to more easily figure out how to route their registry to download from yours. And this is very much how a corporate setting, you might not have access to npm.js or Maven Central directly. You talk to a local artifact repository, and then it behind the scenes caches and downloads them. And so that's kind of mentioned in this. There's also this RSS feed. So how do we know that something's changed, like a new version got published? And we basically took the idea that exists already in Onto server, which is a terminology server, and they use an RSS Atom feed to basically allow their downstream nodes to be aware of when new code systems or value sets have been added upstream. And there's also like some work to support just off-the-shelf artifact repositories like Verdaccio and Nexus or Artifactory. Let's see. There's another, so I'm switching gears. I mentioned at the beginning there's a lot of knowledge operations. And what we try to do is create some patterns. Like when we are calling an operation on a knowledge artifact, how do we identify the knowledge artifact? Like we want to Do we want to spell it URL or resource URL kind of camel cased or with a dash in it and so on. And so there's a section in the IG that has these operation profile, pattern profiles effectively where we're trying to conventionalize the way that you name things. Also, there's many operations that you might need to pass in, like where your content server is or your terminology server endpoints are. And so it's just trying to get the naming conventions similar so that as implementers, you don't have to it's not surprising what the parameters are called for these operations. So kind of the last-ish major section here is this difficulty that I talked a little bit about before, which is dealing with these unversioned canonical resources. So if I have a value set and I'm referring to a code system, LOINC, and I don't specify the actual version, what do we do? And so this is, in some cases, a feature. In some cases, can be seen as a bug. So it's actually convenient if you're creating your content on an annual basis and you don't want to release new versions every time a code system updates. And so in that case, it's actually convenient not to refer to a specific version of LOINC, and it's okay from a content maintenance perspective to not do that. But in other cases, if you have a QMS process or if if your use cases are different, you want to have the ability to have deterministic references and have a QA cycle that always tests using LOINC 274. And then only when you're ready to go to 276 or 275 or whatever the next version is, that can be part of your QA and your QMS cycle. And so right, so I guess I probably should have advanced to this slide. So the current solution, there's specifically for value sets like the expand use case, there's a system version parameter that we can use for this. This parameter doesn't really exist on other knowledge operations and in some cases isn't quite exhaustive in being able to go down to all the dependencies that it might refer to. And so what we're proposing in this IG is a manifest, which is actually a FHIR library resource that has in it all of the operation parameters, including expansion parameters, and it has all the dependencies, and that's passed into knowledge operations. And so in this case, this manifest itself is a FHIR knowledge artifact. It's a library resource type, and it has its own version. So in this case, you could have version 4 of your quality measure, and then you can have version 1 of your manifest that kind of pins it to a specific version of LOINC. And then you can use those kind of in concert in your engine that's running those measures. And now when a new version of LOINC comes out, if you're using that same version 1 manifest, there's going to be no difference. It's deterministically going to be set to what that was. But now your QA team or whoever could decide to make a manifest version 2 that would now point at the new LOINC code system. And now your knowledge operations would be able to use that. And so it kind of gives a little bit of independence too, so you're not kind of tightly coupling your content to a specific, having this manifest separate allows you to kind of have this, I guess, dimension in your QA and in your content kind of publishing process. And so the manifest is in there. I kind of covered all of this, and you can check that out. Yeah, so I guess I don't know how much time do we have? We have plenty of time. So hopefully I was able to introduce you to the CRMI implementation guide. Do I have to the top of the hour? Or 45?
Top of the hour.
Oh, I thought it was 45.
No.
Okay.
No, so you can, if you have extra slides or...
Okay.
Or we could do a long Q&A.
Okay, well, yeah, I hope this made some sense. Bryn's also been working on this a lot, so we have a couple people that could help with any questions that you might have or clarifications. But Yeah, I mean, our hope is that we can make the content, the knowledge artifact side interoperable, just like we're seeing all the effort on the FHIR patient data side. So, yeah, thanks. Thanks for attending and your attention. And yeah, we'll open it up for some
Let's do Q&A. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Anyone? René.
Two questions, short one, hopefully. The manifest, how's the maturity of the manifest now? Since I haven't seen any in any of the examples that I've been looking at, and I know there was still some discussion on how the manifest exactly is going to look like. I don't need to know the details, but just what's the maturity level?
I think there is an implementation using it. Didn't you say that?
So, we are using it in 2 spaces right now. So we're using it in 2 spaces right now. One is in quality measures and in preparing for the FHIR-based quality measurement. The quality measure IG STU4 has examples and included test cases that excuse me, demonstrate that capability, and we've been using that at Connectathons, and there's an implementation of the Value Set Authority Center that publishes or that supports and uses that manifest parameter. It's sort of analogous to, if you're familiar with the way VSAC works, it's analogous to the expansion profile, right? And so really from the VSAC perspective, it's just calling the parameter manifest and making explicit what's happening in an expansion profile, that you're actually setting code system versions and value set versions. And that is functional, and we've tested that at all of the last several connectors. We're also using that in a project with the Association of Public Health Laboratories, where we're helping support the development of value set libraries for the triggering codes that trigger public health reportable events. And that's almost exactly the same use case in terms of a set of value sets that have to be produced, maintained, and pinned to specific versions as they're actually content released. And that is there's an implementation of a value set manager that allows the people developing that content to release that with a manifest. So I would say from a FMM level, it is 3.
Second question, I wrote my own, we talked about this before, I wrote my own repository for using training courses, but I'm really only interested in exposing the distribution functionality. So I was looking at the capability statements in the implementation guide, and it forces me to have both the authoring side of things as well as the distribution side of things. So does it make sense to perhaps split that? It's a bit of a detailed question.
Yeah, no, it's a good
just putting
question.
an idea in your mind. That's.
I think I would be in favor of that. I don't know what you think, Bryn, but it's. I think. I think it's a good idea. I mean, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah.
So let me make sure I understand, because I think we already say that. So in the terminology and artifact capability statements, we say, we define a sharable, a publishable, and an authoring capability statement. And they're kind of layered, basically the same way the profiles are layered. If you go to the capabilities, and then the repository statement. So we don't, like, the only thing we say shall on is that you are a sharable. But if you are also a publishable, then you have to do this. But you don't have to be a publishable. And if you're also an authoring, then you have to do this. But you don't have to be an authoring. We tried to layer it so that
Yeah.
if you wanted to just be a publishable repository, you don't support write at all, right? You can do that. We do in the publishable repository say that you should support at least post so that you can get things in there, but you don't have to do that either, because you could do that from the back end. The only things that we say you have to do in a publishable are the things that are related to like metadata searching, like all the kind of making it easy for people to find stuff in your repository. And all of the authoring capability, all the write capability is in that authoring capability statement. And in that statement, we say you shall, but we don't say you shall support artifact authoring, if that makes sense. Did I understand the question correctly?
I think so, yeah, I saw that in the requirement for the upcoming CMS Connectathon, where there was, if you want to participate as a package, then you have to do this capability statement. And I was looking at that and going like, that includes all the authoring stuff. So maybe it was just a wrong link there. But anyway, we can follow up later.
Yeah, if you want to participate, like you could do just sharable, and that would be awesome.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. Gentleman in the back.
Is there a proof of concept or reference implementation for some of these?
I don't know if there's an open source one. I know that a couple of companies I work with have some internal ones. Is there a supporting the $ package operation, I think is probably one of the big ones for the distribution side. I think Happy has a version that supports that, which is an open source option.
Right. So the APHL project I mentioned is actually using an extension of FHIR server, and the package operation implementation is in the clinical reasoning module, which is then used in the FHIR. So it's not all there yet, but it's on target to be there.
Yep. Answer your question, Joel? Okay. Over there? Oh. Other questions? Sure, there are questions. Yeah.
So like with the content IG, so you would use that to, if we wanted to store like the quality measure, like and everything related, like libraries into like Smile CDR, like the clinical engine. Is that related to this, like?
Storing a quality measure?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could structure it as like each quality measure is its own like implementation guide from like if you're using like the IG publisher point of view. And then you could publish them independently and they'd have their own independent versions. You also could decide to have one IG with a ton of measures like that just you would publish together. But yeah, that's generally the idea, is to be able to support the lifecycle management and the updating. And many times with a quality measure, you might be updating several things like the FHIR measure resource as well as the FHIR CQL, the library resource that has the CQL in it. And you kind of want to publish those together. So typically, when you do like the FHIR package approach, they all share the same version. So every time you publish like your new measure, your new guideline or whatever, all the resources contained in there would have the same version property on them.
Okay, thank you.
So my understanding of the package operation is you're tracing the dependencies to collect everything up.
Yeah.
Some of those dependencies will be things like SNOMED, which you're not going to package up.
Yep. Yeah, I
presumably.
mean, that's a good point. I think that's I think there's a parameter, isn't there, in the package operation to not include the code system. You can exclude certain things, and so we actually do that because you don't want to download all of SNOMED if it's a dependency on a CQL library. That would be outrageous.
Going back to the question about reference implementations, I remembered another one. MITRE has an implementation of this artifact repository service, but focused on measures, and that is something that we've brought to, the MITRE team has brought to all the Connectathons. They'll bring that to the next one too, and there's a link to that implementation if you're interested. It's like an open source artifact repository service implementation. On packaging things like code systems, one of the parameters to package, and this is all like not worked out, but one of the parameters to package is actually a terminology capabilities statement.
Yeah.
And so you can say, give me a package where these are the expectations for my abilities to evaluate terminology in my environment. So you can say, give me the packages, or give me the value sets for LOINC, because I can compute the LOINC codes, but don't give me anything with SNOMED. Give me the expansions for those, because I can't deal with SNOMED. So that's kind of the approach that we're proposing to address that. And then also, as Brian mentioned, there's a specific URL you can pick. Like you could actually say, don't give me SNOMED, or don't give me this value set. I've already got it. So there's a lot of control in the include and exclude over what actually comes back, specifically to help address things like that. Because yeah, you're never gonna ask for the whole SNOMED. But if you have an environment that can deal with it, you can tell the package operation that you can support that, and it should be able to give you expansions or definitions depending on what your capabilities are.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the package. Can I see, what is the output of when you call that package operation? What,
It's a bundle.
okay.
Yeah.
And so,
It's like the collection of all the things that you went through the dependency tracing.
okay, so you can take that bundle and then store it into your FHIR server to like execute quality measures, or I mean, is that,
Yeah, I guess you could. I think the use case for this is more like this bundle is going to go actually to the engine that's running the measure, or be used by some execution, downstream execution environment. But yeah, you could also use the output of the package and store it somewhere else if you wanted to. But there are a couple other APIs proposed in this, such as the syndication API, and you obviously also have regular FHIR, get operations that you could use as well.
Anyone else? No? Well, Brian, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again.